Rain drizzled down the curved glass canopy of the docking ring, casting blurry neon reflections across the polished floor. The orbital city of Lysatra 9 never slept. Its tiers of nightlife, black market bazaars, and diplomatic embassies shimmered like veins of electric blood. In this high-tech nest, suspended above a gas giant, secrets were currency, and silence was cheaper than loyalty. Cade Riven leaned on the balcony of a mid-tier tavern called the Ember Coil, watching the movement of ships arriving and leaving like fireflies. He sipped something strong and synthetic, the kind of drink that numbed the tongue just enough to make a bad idea sound like a plan. Tall, lean, and dressed in a reinforced jacket patched with old Smuggler Guild symbols, Cade looked like someone who'd been shot at more times than he cared to count. His short, silver-blonde hair was damp from the walk through the mist outside, and a faint scar arced under his left eye, disappearing into the stubble along his jaw. "Another one?" asked the bartender, a one-eyed Lurvian who wore a plasma coil around his neck like jewelry. Cade slid the empty glass back with a nod. "One more for the road." "You always say that, but you're still here." "Maybe the road keeps turning back," Cade replied with a tired smirk. He didn't want to be here, not really. He had a rendezvous scheduled within the hour, one that paid more than most people saw in a decade. A package was waiting in his ship, the Drift Seraph, stashed behind a false panel beneath the nav console. He hadn't asked what it was. Smugglers like him learned early that questions only led to graves. All he needed to know was that the client wanted it delivered to the outer verge, fast and quiet, and that someone was willing to pay enough to buy him a moon in exchange. The moment the drink hit his lips, he heard the shift in the crowd noise. Not louder, quieter, almost like a pressure drop in the room. His instincts kicked in before his thoughts caught up. Something was wrong. He turned just as the double doors to the tavern hissed open. 3 heavily armed Karathi enforcers walked in, their chitinous armor marked with symbols he didn't recognize. Between them, walking like she owned the damn place, was a woman in a dark red cloak that billowed slightly behind her with each step. She stopped, lowered her hood, and locked eyes with Cade. Her skin shimmered in the low light, an iridescent shade somewhere between violet and midnight blue. Her hair, cropped close on the sides but long and metallic silver on top, fell over one eye in deliberate disarray. She looked alien, because she was, but not in the insectoid or scaled way that made most humans uneasy. She was elegant, lethal, and not trying to hide either of those facts. Cade's pulse didn't skip. It flared like a blown fuse. He set his glass down slowly. "Let me guess. You're not here for a drink." The Karathi spread out, surrounding him. The woman approached until she was a meter away, arms folded behind her back. Her gaze didn't waver. "Cade Riven," she said, her voice smooth as velvet and cold as vacuum. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." "Lady, I've got a lot of things that fit that description. You'll have to be more specific." She didn't smile, just tilted her head. "I'm giving you a chance," she said, almost bored. "Hand it over. Walk away." "Tempting," he said, standing up. "But here's the problem. People who offer me chances usually don't expect me to live past the handoff." "Any last words?" she asked, reaching under her cloak. Cade's eyes flicked to the Karathi. Too close for a clean escape. The exit behind him was blocked. He needed a diversion or a miracle. "Yeah," he said, smirking as he raised his hands in mock surrender. "Your sidearm safety's still on." The woman's hand froze halfway to drawing. Her eyes widened just enough. That was all he needed. Cade lunged forward, grabbing her wrist and twisting it as the concealed pistol cleared its holster. A sharp burst of plasma fired into the ceiling, sending molten slag dripping down like raindrops from hell. The bar exploded into chaos as patrons scattered and overturned tables. The Karathi surged toward him, but Cade was already vaulting over the railing to the lower level. He landed hard, rolled, and sprinted for the rear maintenance exit, weaving between startled aliens and spilled drinks. Behind him, he could hear the thunder of armored feet and a voice cursing in an alien tongue that sounded almost lyrical. The alley outside stank of ozone and burnt coolant. Cade didn't stop running until he reached the docking lifts. He slammed his wrist against the access panel. The doors hissed open slowly, too slowly. Footsteps pounded behind him. The red-cloaked woman appeared at the end of the alley. This time her gun was out and aimed. Cade raised both hands. You really need to work on your bedside manner. She didn't fire, not yet. I could have shot you in that bar, she said, but you didn't. I'm reconsidering. And yet you're still talking. He took a step back into the lift as it opened fully. Means you need me, or you're really bad at follow-through. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The lift doors closed between them. By the time the Drift Seraph cleared Lysatra's orbital control and entered the jump corridor, Cade had already recalibrated the security locks and rerouted the nav beacon. He leaned back in the pilot's seat, breathing hard. But something wouldn't let him relax. The look in her eyes hadn't been pure hostility. She wasn't just trying to retrieve stolen tech. She knew something about him or the package or both. And her hesitation hadn't been tactical, it had been personal. As the stars stretched into streaks, Cade let out a slow breath. This is going to get messy, he muttered. He had no idea just how right he was. The jump corridor spat the Drift Seraph out into open space near the fractured moon of Caldraxis. Shards of its ancient surface drifted in orbit, cracked from an event no one remembered, but everyone feared. It was the perfect place to disappear for a while, unless you had someone persistent on your trail. Cade Riven knew all about persistence. He just hadn't expected it to look like that woman in the red cloak, with eyes like starlit oceans and a voice that somehow made every word feel heavier than it should. He pulled the ship into a tight glide beneath the moon's largest fragment, tapping into the ship's secure comms relay. It was time to contact the client, confirm the delivery route, and get this job off his back. But the channel buzzed with static. Then something worse. Interference. Deliberate. Masked signatures. Someone was blocking his outgoing signals. Cade swore and punched the console harder than necessary. He'd been followed. The proximity sensors lit up a moment later. A sleek black vessel coasted into view on the Seraph's long-range scan. No lights, no ID transponder. Just the soft shimmer of stealth plating shifting like oil on water. He recognized the silhouette instantly. Not military, not corporate. Custom, personal, her ship. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered. Before he could react, a tremor ran through the hull. Docking clamps. She wasn't shooting him. She was boarding. The inner alarms remained silent. She must have bypassed them. Cade scrambled to the armory locker, yanked open the door, and grabbed the first blaster within reach. But before he could turn, a soft hiss of the pressure seal behind him told him he was too late. Don't move, came the now familiar voice. He turned slowly. She was standing just inside the airlock. Gun raised, but there was a different energy in her stance this time. No longer cold and calculating. Alert, wary, like someone bracing for a question they didn't want to answer. Seriously? Cade said, lifting the barrel of his own weapon slightly. Do we have to do the gun thing every time we meet? Drop it. You first. They stared at each other, the tension electric in the cramped corridor. I'm not here to kill you, she said at last. If I wanted to, I wouldn't have boarded your ship. I'd have just blown it apart. Forgive me if I don't immediately embrace the sentiment, he said, though he slowly lowered his blaster. She did the same. They stood in silence until Cade finally asked, What the hell is so important about this package? Her gaze darkened. You really don't know. He shook his head. I was paid not to ask. She stepped closer, lowering her hood. Her skin shimmered subtly in the low light of the corridor, and he realized she was injured. Faint plasma burn along her side. Darkened fabric where blood had dried. I don't have time to explain everything, but that device you're carrying, it's not just stolen tech. It's something called the Solaris node. It was hidden for centuries in a vault only accessible by certain genetic markers. Let me guess, Cade said. Yours? Yes, she replied flatly. Mine. And it wasn't stolen from a government or a corporation. It was taken from my people, the Tyrannus Assembly. Cade frowned. Your Tyrannus? I thought they went extinct after the Vornal War. She shook her head. Not extinct. Dispersed. Hunted. I'm one of the few remaining outside the core. So what's this node thing really do? It harmonizes genetic material, she said. And when he didn't respond, she added, it was built to test and stabilize hybrid DNA across species, a relic of an era when tyrannous scientists believed peace could be engineered into the blood itself. Cade blinked. You're telling me this thing can make hybrids? Not make, bond. It's a bridge between biology. It doesn't just mix DNA, it synchronizes it, accelerates compatibility. He raised an eyebrow. So why's everyone suddenly want it? Because whoever controls it, she said, could control the next phase of evolution, or weaponize it, or both. He exhaled slowly. And you're afraid I've already triggered it? No, she said, I'm afraid we both have. That froze him. We fought on the rooftop, she continued. Contact like that, in proximity to the node, if your genetics are even remotely compatible with mine, it may have activated in ways neither of us intended. That device was designed to react to physical connection. The old scientists called it resonance. A beat of silence. Well, Cade said, rubbing the back of his neck, that's one hell of a first date. The corner of her mouth twitched. Not a smile exactly, but close. I'm Lyra, she said, finally giving him her name. Lyra Talon. Cade, he said, but you already knew that. She nodded. Your name was on the manifest. They hired you for plausible deniability, disposable if needed. Charming, he gestured toward the cockpit. We need to get off this rock. And if you're right, and we've tripped some ancient alien matchmaking tech, I'd like to avoid sharing our love story with the mercenaries you probably pissed off. Lyra followed him forward, one hand still hovering near her sidearm, but less tense now. So what's your plan? She asked as he slid into the pilot's chair. There's a place, an old research platform outside regulated space, used to be run by a fringe xenobiologist named Dr. Quen. He owes me a favor. Why does a biologist owe you a favor? I got him out of a Karathi prison once. Long story. Lyra sat in the co-pilot seat and winced slightly, hand pressing to her side. You're bleeding, he said, reaching for the med kit. I'm fine. You're not. He pulled out the dermal patch and gently moved closer, pressing it just below the tear in her tunic. She inhaled sharply but didn't push him away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. You always this stubborn? He asked. Only with people who act like smug bravado is a personality trait. Ouch! She tilted her head toward him. You're not what I expected. Good or bad? I haven't decided yet. He stood, tossed the medkit aside, and keyed in the jump coordinates. As the drift seraph powered up, the view outside shimmered with stars and debris. Silence settled between them again, but it wasn't hostile, just heavy, charged. You said the node reacts to contact, he said after a moment. Lyra didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the stars. But then she said, without looking at him, it responds to potential. He turned to face her. So what happens if we keep running? It gets stronger, she said, finally meeting his gaze. The resonance builds. It adapts. Binds. And if we try to ignore it? Lyra looked away. I don't think we can. Outside the viewport, the stars bent and blurred as the drift seraph jumped toward unknown space. Inside the cockpit, two fugitives sat side by side, bound by a choice neither fully understood, and a bond neither had intended to make. But fate, it seemed, had stopped asking for permission. The research platform drifted like a half-forgotten memory at the edge of the Cantheris belt, cloaked in the static of asteroid interference and layered encryption protocols. Cade slowed the drift seraph as they approached, the ship's sensors brushing against the electromagnetic fog surrounding the station. This is the place? Lyra asked, arms crossed, but her voice carried a hint of unease. It's off the charts and off the books, Cade replied, rotating the ship to align with a hidden docking port near the platform's underbelly. Quen used to call it the Husk, said it was once a mining rig before he refitted it with labs and living quarters. She raised an eyebrow. That's comforting. Hey, he said, glancing at her. You want sterile and pretty? We should have stayed in civilized space. You want answers? This is where we get them. The docking clamps locked with a low rumble. Cade powered down the engines and led the way to the airlock. Lyra followed, her movements slower than usual, The plasma burn on her side still hadn't fully healed, though she refused to acknowledge it. Pride, or maybe something else. Maybe fear. As the outer hatch slid open, they were met with darkness. Only the emergency strips along the corridor floor lit their way. Great, Cade muttered. Lights are still on Quinn's schedule, which means 3 hours behind real time. They moved down the narrow hallway toward the main lab. It smelled of dust, copper, and sterilized metal. When the door to the lab finally hissed open, a lone figure stood in the center, silhouetted by the flicker of outdated holographic displays. The man was tall, pale, with a shaved head and a long coat stained with chemical burns. His cybernetic eye glowed a soft green. "Well," he said, voice raspy but amused, "if it isn't the galaxy's most reluctant courier," and his gaze shifted to Lyra. "Ah, this must be your complication." Lyra tensed. "Dr. Quinn, I presume." Cade nodded. "She's why we're here." Quinn stepped forward, scanning Lyra with a handheld device that emitted a soft whine. "You're Tyrannus, or at least a surviving branch of the genome? Curious. The resonance levels between you two, they're not just active, they're evolving." Lyra glanced at Cade. "Told you." "Why does that sound like bad news?" Cade asked. Quinn tapped a few keys on a console, and a large projection bloomed into the air. Double helixes, energy currents, gene pairs shifting like a living map. "The node you're carrying is ancient, not just tech, but biotech, a living system. It's scanning, adapting, and reinforcing any stable bridge between genetically compatible species. And in your case," he looked at them both, "it's doing more than bonding. It's rewriting." Cade's stomach sank. "Rewriting what?" "Both of you." The silence hit hard. Lyra's jaw tightened. "I knew it accelerated compatibility. I didn't realize it altered existing structures." Quinn nodded. "Because it's never been this active. I've read scattered Tyrannus documentation, fragments, rumors. The node was thought to be dormant for centuries. It needed an ignition trigger, something to reboot it." His gaze narrowed. "Something emotional, physical, intimate." Neither Cade nor Lyra said anything. The doctor sighed. "Look, your DNA is now cross-referenced and partially merged. That's not something you can undo by separating. The longer you remain in proximity, the stronger the effect becomes. And it's not just molecular, it's neurological." Cade leaned against the wall, processing. "You're saying we're getting mentally synced?" "To a degree. Emotions, instincts. You may begin experiencing thoughts, reactions that feel foreign, but are, in fact, each other's." Lyra stared at the projection, unreadable. "How do we stop it?" Quinn shrugged. "Short of stasis isolation or a hard reset of the node, you don't, but I'm not sure you want to." "What do you mean?" she asked. He zoomed in on the display, showing flickers of blue light along certain strands. "You're not just changing, you're stabilizing, harmonizing. The node wasn't just meant to test hybrid viability, it was meant to enable it. You two are the first compatible pair it's encountered in centuries. If left uninterrupted, the end result might be something unprecedented." Cade's voice was low. "Like what?" Quinn looked up. "A new species, something not quite human, not quite Tyrannus, something entirely other." A heavy silence settled over the lab. Finally, Lyra asked, "What happens if someone else gets their hands on the node now?" Quinn's expression darkened. "Then they won't need the node itself. They'll want you, both of you. You're now the living blueprint." Cade clenched his fists. "Vanguard? The regime? Who's most likely?" "Anyone who values control," Quinn replied, "and that's most of the galaxy." A distant klaxon blared. Cade's head snapped toward the hallway. "Was that?" Quinn rushed to a nearby panel and tapped into the exterior sensors. The screen flickered, then stabilized. A sleek black ship hovered just outside the platform. No ID, but unmistakably hostile. Its docking clamps were already extended. "Damn it," Cade muttered. "That's not Vanguard, that's freelance. Shadow contracts." "Bounty hunters," Lyra said, tone like ice. They're tracking the node's emissions. Can you cloak the signal? Kate asked. Not without destroying the node, Quinn said. The lights flickered. Quinn's eyes widened. They're breaching the outer hull. You need to go. Now! Lyra hesitated, then reached into her belt and produced the node from its protective shell. The cube pulsed in her palm, glowing faintly in rhythm with her heartbeat. Kate stepped close. Don't let it go. I'm not, she said, but I'm not running again. You don't have a choice. Another explosion rocked the station. Emergency lights flashed. Quinn slammed the door lock to his lab. They're inside. If they get through this door, I can't stop them. Cade grabbed Lyra's hand. Then we leave through the maintenance shaft. We get back to the Seraph and vanish. But Lyra's grip didn't tighten. She was staring at the node, transfixed. Its light had changed. Brighter now, cycling through strange frequencies. Cade, she whispered, it's not just reacting to me anymore. He looked down. The blue glow was spreading, up her arm, and faintly now, into his hand where they touched. The node wasn't just bonding them, it was preparing something, and someone out there wanted it for themselves. The access hatch groaned as Cade pried it open, the sharp scent of scorched metal and coolant hitting them immediately. Behind them, the reinforced lab door shook under another explosive impact, Quinn's locking systems barely holding. The research station's emergency sirens wailed as Lyra dropped through the maintenance shaft behind Cade. The node clutched tightly in her hand. Where does this lead? She asked, landing beside him in the crawl space lit only by the flicker of backup systems. Utility corridor, comes out a few decks down, close to the auxiliary bay, he answered, already crawling forward. If my ship's still there, we're flying out. If not, we improvise, Lyra finished. Exactly. Above them, metal shrieked. The lab was breached. They'll realize we're not there in seconds, she said. Then we better move faster. They dropped from the shaft into a half-lit hallway, Cade leading the way through the skeletal framework of the lower levels. The station groaned with age and damage. Emergency lights strobed red, bathing Lyra's iridescent skin in a surreal hue. She moved silently, every muscle primed, her training evident in how she swept corners, checked shadows, and kept her weapon low but ready. Cade admired it, admired her, the way she moved, the way she calculated risk, the way her eyes never gave away fear, even when it was probably clawing inside. As they neared the bay doors, the sound of boot falls on steel grew louder. Cade yanked Lyra behind a bulkhead just as two bounty hunters swept into the corridor, one a thick-limbed, cybernetically augmented human, the other a spindly Avexi with glowing ocular implants. The node pulsed faintly in Lyra's grip. They're tracking its signature, she murmured. Cade nodded. Cover me. She did. A single gesture, and she slid to the far end of the wall, drawing their attention with a sharp burst of fire that scorched across the ceiling. As the hunters turned, Cade lunged from behind, slamming the larger one into the wall with a brutal shoulder check. The Avexi fired wildly, too late, before Lyra disarmed him with a precise kick and brought her elbow down across his jaw. Seconds later, both were unconscious. Cade turned to her, panting. You okay? I'm fine. You? He shrugged, brushing plasma dust from his jacket. You know, thriving. They burst into the docking bay, and there she was, the Drift Seraph, still intact, still waiting, her hull streaked with soot, but humming with life. Relief swelled in Cade's chest. Then it died. 4 more hunters stood at the bottom of the ramp, weapons drawn, and a woman in a long obsidian coat stepped forward from their midst. Her face was beautiful in the way only genetically sculpted features could be, too symmetrical, too smooth. Her eyes were solid black. Ah, she said, voice cold. I was beginning to wonder if you'd try to run. Cade raised his blaster, but the woman didn't flinch. You're wasting time, she said. The node doesn't belong to you. Hand it over, and we'll let you walk. Lyra stepped beside him, lifting her own weapon. You must think we're stupid. No, the woman said with a thin smile. Just sentimental. Your bond is your weakness. The node feeds on it, and when you're dead, it will adapt to someone new. Lyra's eyes narrowed. It doesn't work that way. You don't even know what it is, do you? The woman's smile widened. A seed, not just of life, but design. The Tyrannus didn't make it to encourage peace. They made it to create control. Harmony at the cost of individuality, bonding as manipulation. It rewires you. Soon you won't know where you end and he begins. She gestured to Cade. That scare you? She asked him. Cade looked to Lyra, who hadn't moved, her fingers tightening around the node, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat in her palm. No, he said. That grounds me. He opened fire first. The hangar erupted into chaos. Blaster fire scorched the air, ricocheting off walls and cargo containers. Cade ducked behind a crate, returning fire with practiced efficiency. Lyra moved like lightning, a blur of red cloak and glowing skin. The node pulsed brighter as she fought, and Cade could feel it through her, an echo of her focus, her pain, her fury, bleeding into him like a second heartbeat. He fired into one attacker, took out another with a close-range pulse shot, and saw Lyra leap up the ramp as the remaining bounty hunters converged. She turned and tossed him the node. Trust me, she shouted. Without thinking, Cade caught it. The moment it touched his skin, everything changed. Time dilated. He felt Lyra. Not just her presence, but her thoughts, her intent, her strategy. She needed cover, a timed detonation, a fake-out maneuver on the loading crane. He moved before the thought fully formed. His body knew what hers had planned. He sprinted toward the bay control panel, slid under a burst of suppressive fire, and slammed his palm into the override. The crane swung violently, crashing down between Lyra and their enemies. Smoke billowed. Alarm screamed. She was already running, meeting him at the ramp as the Seraph engines roared online. Inside, he jumped into the pilot seat. Lyra slid into co-pilot, chest heaving. You planned that? He asked, still catching his breath. I did, she said. I executed it. We did. The drift Seraph tore from the station just as the bounty hunters scrambled to recover. Behind them, Quen's voice came over the comm. They're jamming long-range scans, he said. I'll try to mislead them, but you're exposed. Understood, Lyra said. Cade turned the ship toward deep space. Where now? Lyra hesitated, then placed the node gently on the console between them. There's a place, not mapped, not monitored, an old Tyrannus sanctuary. He glanced at her. That sounds suspiciously mythical. It was real. My mother took me there once before she died. She called it the Sanctum. If anything still exists that can explain what's happening to us, it'll be there. Cade didn't argue. Then we go. The jump engines spooled to life, and just before they engaged, Lyra turned to him, her voice quiet. Do you feel it? He looked down at the node, then back at her. Yes, he said. I feel you. Her lips parted slightly, her fingers brushing his. Then the stars bent, and the Seraph vanished into the dark. The drift Seraph coasted through uncharted space like a whisper between stars. The usual nav data gave way to darkness, as if the galaxy had forgotten this region entirely. Cade leaned forward in his seat, eyes narrowing at the absence of gravitational markers or traffic signatures. No patrols, no beacons. Just a void. You sure this place exists? He asked. Lyra didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was fixed beyond the viewport, where only faint pinpricks of ancient starlight dotted the black. It's not on maps, she said at last. But I remember the way. The Tyrannus encoded routes in memory, landmarks tied to celestial alignment, not coordinates. They called it traveling through resonance space. Sounds spiritual. It was science, but it felt like faith. Cade glanced sideways. And if your memory's off, then we drift forever. Comforting. Despite the tension, a quiet had settled between them. Not the brittle silence of distrust, but something slower, heavier. Since the escape from the research platform, the node had remained inert, yet its presence lingered in every glance they shared. He'd begun to feel her before she spoke. Knew when her jaw tensed in thought, when she was masking pain, when her mind wandered to places she didn't want him to see. And she'd noticed things in him too. You haven't been sleeping, she said, not looking at him. Too much on my mind. Nightmares? Memories. He leaned back, flexing the fingers of his right hand. I used to run ops through the outer verge. One job went sideways, cost me 2 crew, my co-pilot, and most of my faith in people. After that, I stopped getting close, stopped caring. And now, he looked at her. Now I'm flying through dark space with a woman I barely know, carrying a living relic that's rewriting our DNA and possibly our future. She didn't smile, but there was something soft in her eyes. You're adapting faster than I expected. I'm a smuggler, he said. Adaptation is survival. They sat in silence again until the sensors beeped faintly. Something had registered. A distortion. Not mass, not energy. Something else. There, Lyra whispered, pointing. A faint shimmer spread ahead, like moonlight dancing across invisible ripples. The veil, she said. Cade stared. What am I looking at? A phase anomaly. You don't find the sanctum, you harmonize with it. He raised an eyebrow. And how do we do that? You let it recognize you. She reached out and touched the node, resting dormant in its case on the console. The moment her skin made contact, it glowed. Soft, rhythmic, pulsing in sync with her heartbeat. Then it pulsed again, stronger, responding to something else. Cade. The light grew until the entire cockpit was bathed in deep blue. The drift seraph shuddered, and the stars vanished. No warning, no jump, just a shift. 1 second they were drifting through nothing, and the next they were surrounded by colossal crystalline structures, like frozen thunderclouds suspended in starlight. Vast rings of glowing glyphs rotated slowly around a central obelisk, floating in space, humming with an energy older than time itself. The sanctum. Cade let out a low whistle. Okay, you win. That's impressive. Lyra didn't respond. She was trembling, just slightly, as if something buried deep inside her was waking up. This was our cradle, she said, where the Tyrannus first touched the node, where they tested the earliest bonds. She stood and stepped closer to the viewport, her breath fogging the glass slightly. Her voice had dropped to a whisper. I haven't been here since I was a child. It was overwhelming even then. Cade lowered the ship toward the main platform, a massive circular landing ring hovering above a sea of slow-shifting light. He landed the Seraph gently, then turned to her. You ready? No, she said, but we don't have a choice. They descended the ramp together. The air outside was breathable, somehow. The platform's surface pulsed faintly underfoot, like walking on the surface of a dreaming mind. Lyra led the way toward the central obelisk, the node cradled in her hands like a newborn star. As they neared it, the glyphs around them shifted, and a voice, soft, layered, genderless, filled the air. Recognized, harmonization achieved, legacy activated. Cade looked around. Was that? Lyra nodded. The sanctum's interface, it's alive. It responds only to bonded pairs. They reached the base of the obelisk. Lyra placed the node into a receptacle, and immediately the structure lit up, cascading lines of energy traveling upward like veins awakening. Holograms appeared in midair, Tyrannus figures speaking in an ancient dialect, records of experiments, of emotions quantified, of cross-species empathy mapped like algorithms. And then one projection stabilized, a single Tyrannus elder with copper-toned skin and violet eyes. She spoke in common. To those who carry the node, know this. The bond you form is not a tool. It is not a weapon. It is a beginning. From conflict, we sought resonance. From fear, connection. If you have found this place, then you are the next chapter. Cade blinked. She knows us. Lyra's voice was steady. She's not real, just a recording. But the hologram turned to them. Your union is already rewriting what we believe possible. You are not anomalies. You are evolution. The light around them grew brighter. The platform began to respond, not with danger, but with invitation. New glyphs unfolded from the ground, revealing a spiral stair descending into the heart of the structure. Where does it go? Cade asked. Lyra stared into the light. To whatever comes next. They descended together. At the base of the spiral, they found a chamber, circular, warm, quiet. The air shimmered faintly, In its center floated a sphere of pure energy, pulsing in rhythm with the node above. "This is the core," Lyra said softly. "The first node, the original period." Cade took a step closer, but Lyra caught his arm. "Wait," she said, her voice suddenly unsure. Cade turned to her and saw the fear in her eyes. "Talk to me," he said. "I can feel it, reacting to us. Not just merging, it's accelerating." "Accelerating what?" She took his hand, placed it over her abdomen. He froze, felt it, not just her heartbeat. Something else. Steady, strong, alive. Cade's mouth went dry. "Lyra!" "I didn't know," she whispered. "Not until now. The node must have detected it when we first bonded. It accelerated everything." He stared at her. "You're pregnant." She nodded. "And the child is the first of its kind." They stood there, silence between them as the realization took root. "This changes everything," Cade said quietly. "No," she corrected. "This is everything." Before they could speak again, a sharp chime sounded from Cade's wristcom, encrypted, urgent. He tapped it. Quen's voice came through, distorted by distance. "Whatever you've done, the signal's flared. You're not hidden anymore. Every major power just reoriented toward your location. The race is on." Cade looked to Lyra. "We need to leave, now." But Lyra was staring into the core. "No," she said. "What do you mean, no?" She turned to him, eyes fierce, luminous. "If we run now, we'll never stop running. We need to finish this. Whatever the sanctum offers, it's the only way we fight back." He hesitated, then nodded. Beside them, the core pulsed again, opening a door deeper into the structure. A path had begun, and they would follow it, together. The passage beyond the core opened into a vast hall that defied physics. It had no discernible ceiling or floor, only shimmering planes of light suspended in a void that pulsed with soft resonance. Lyra stepped forward without hesitation, the note in her hands humming louder with each pace. Cade followed, though every instinct in him screamed this was beyond anything he'd trained for, smuggled through, or escaped from. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air changed. Denser, warmer. And then a flicker of something more. Memory, maybe. A vision. Not his. Lyra gasped beside him. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Cade blinked. "I think I saw... your mother?" Lyra nodded slowly, her face pale. "And I saw your brother, the one you lost during the Verge job." "I didn't say I had a brother." "You didn't need to." The node pulsed again between them, and images appeared around them like ripples in water. Their memories, tangled, shared, a childhood moment from Cade's past where he'd nearly drowned in a coolant bay on Drellex 3, overlaid with Lyra's first mission as a Tyrannus cadet. Her hands trembling as she held a rifle, her mother's voice telling her that fear was natural, surrender was not. "This place, it's not just physical," Cade said. "It's reflective." Lyra nodded. "It's testing us, measuring the bond." And then the images faded, replaced by a projection of the Tyrannus Elder again, her expression serene. "If you have reached this chamber, your resonance is proven. But harmony is not without challenge. The bond will be tested not by combat, but by conflict of spirit." A new light formed between them, and suddenly the room transformed into a simulation chamber. Dense jungle terrain, a fractured alien battlefield under twin moons. But it wasn't just illusion. They were armed, surrounded, and not alone. Figures emerged from the trees, versions of themselves, distorted, cold, and ruthless. One Lyra dressed in ceremonial Tyrannus war armor, her face blank, voice devoid of empathy. One Cade, cold-eyed, pragmatic, weapon raised. "They're us," Cade murmured, "but not who we are now, who we could have been." The projection spoke again. "To claim your future, you must defeat the version of yourselves who do not evolve." And the doppelgangers attacked. Cade's double moved fast, calculated, like every inch of his body had been trained for efficiency over instinct. The first blow came hard, an elbow to Cade's jaw that sent him staggering. The other Lyra circled the real one, emotionless, her weapon humming with kinetic energy. You're afraid of what comes next, the clone told Lyra. You're not me, Lyra growled. I'm what you would be if you gave up compassion, if you surrendered to control. Lyra met the attack head-on. Meanwhile, Cade fought like someone who'd learned not from a soldier's textbook, but from alleyways and betrayal. He ducked under his doppelganger's strikes, used his environment, improvised with every step. But the fight pushed him to the edge. Every punch was personal, as if he were facing down all the fear he'd buried since the moment he agreed to carry the node. You never cared about anyone, his double spat. Not really. You kept people at a distance because you knew what you are. Broken. I was, Cade said, catching the arm that swung toward him, twisting and throwing the clone into a tree trunk. But I changed. He saw Lyra struggling, her clone faster, relentless. Their blades clashed in a blur, energy searing the air between them. She'll leave you, the clone hissed. They always do. You're too human, too fragile. But Lyra wasn't fragile. She caught her clone's wrist, twisted, and for the first time her voice shook. Not with fear, but with defiance. I'm not bound by who I used to be, she said, and I'm not afraid to feel anymore. She struck once, clean and true. Both copies dissolved into light. The jungle faded, the chamber returned. Breathing hard, bruised and shaken, they stood at the center of the sanctum once more. The node floated above them now, its glow impossibly bright, its resonance amplified by their victory. And then it descended, hovering between them. Bond stabilized, the voice intoned. Symbiosis complete. The node fractured, not destroyed, but transformed. Its smooth surface split into twin halves, each pulsing with identical energy. One floated to Lyra, the other to Cade. What the hell, he muttered. Lyra caught hers gently. It split the core, 2 anchors, one for each of us. Then abruptly the chamber darkened. A warning pulse from Cade's comm, Quinn's frequency again, urgent and jagged. They've found you. Cade's stomach dropped. How? The sanctum's veil collapsed when the node finalized its imprint. Every major power triangulated your position. Vanguard, Gen Coalition, even the damn hegemony. You have minutes, maybe less. Cade looked at Lyra. We have to leave. She nodded, but her hands clutched the node fragments. If we abandon this place, we can't come back, she said. The pathway won't reopen. The sanctum will fold in on itself. All of this will be gone. Cade stepped close, lowering his voice. Then we take what we've learned and make sure it matters. She turned to him, eyes glowing faintly with residual resonance. We're not just bonded, Cade. We're becoming something new. If they capture us, they won't. Explosions rocked the sanctum above. They ran, back through the corridor of light, past the spiraling glyphs, up toward the drift seraph. As they boarded, Cade saw it. Vanguard ships descending from orbit, drop pods scattering across the crystal terrain. Lyra slid into the co-pilot seat, fingers flying across the controls. Engines online, FTL charged. Cade punched the throttle. Then let's vanish. The seraph surged upward as energy bolts lanced past the hull. But the node shards pulsed suddenly, and a slipstream opened before them, carved not by nav data, but by resonance itself. A shortcut through space, through possibility. They plunged into it. Silence returned. Inside the cockpit, the 2 halves of the node pulsed once, then synced. Cade turned to Lyra. What now? Her fingers rested gently on her shard. Now we find somewhere to build, to protect. Whatever comes for us next, we'll face it, together. Cade took her hand, and the stars parted around them. The slipstream carried them far, so far that conventional star maps stopped rendering. The drift seraph emerged in a quiet quadrant where space itself seemed to breathe. There were no patrol routes here, no communication relays, no civilizations. Only drifting stardust and the skeletal remains of ancient moons orbiting a dying blue star. Cade leaned back in the pilot's seat, hands still trembling slightly from the jump. We shouldn't be alive. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She was watching the shard of the node in her lap, which now pulsed at a gentler frequency, as if it too had exhausted itself. "They would have torn us apart back there," she said softly, "if the resonance hadn't opened that path." "You think it created that slipstream?" Cade asked. She nodded. "Or unlocked it. Either way, we didn't jump through space. We jumped through intention." Cade looked out the viewport. "So where exactly did our intentions send us?" "Somewhere hidden," she said, "but I don't think we're alone." She was right. Moments later, the proximity alarms chimed. Not in warning, but in recognition. A structure emerged from the shadows, a massive station built into the shell of an asteroid, glowing faintly with organic light. Its design didn't match any known faction. It resembled Tyrannus architecture, but felt older, less polished, more raw. The station welcomed them without resistance. No weapons locked, no demands were broadcast. Just a single message blinked onto their screen, written in ancient Tyrannus script. "Return to origin. Recognition complete." Cade raised an eyebrow. "I'm starting to think this node has a plan of its own." The docking clamps extended and gently drew the Seraph in. They disembarked into a wide circular hangar where the walls pulsed like the inside of a living organism. Cool blues and golds shifting in slow harmony. They weren't met by soldiers or scientists, but by a single figure. She stood tall, skin the color of sunlit copper, her long white hair braided with threads of starlight. Her presence radiated calm, but her eyes held the sharpness of someone who had lived through many endings. "I am Sorel," she said in perfect common, with only the faintest Tyrannus accent. "Caretaker of the cradle." Lyra stepped forward. "You're Tyrannus." "I was," Sorel said. "Now I am something else. As are you." She turned her gaze on Cade. "And you, human, yet no longer fully so. The resonance has touched your core." Cade felt exposed beneath her gaze, but held it. "We didn't ask for this." "No," Sorel said, "but you accepted it, and that matters more." They followed her through arched corridors into what could only be described as a sanctuary. It pulsed with life, trees grown in gravity-defying spirals, water flowing upward in crystalline ribbons. Dozens of beings occupied the space, some Tyrannus, others of mixed species. Some were children. "Who are they?" Cade asked. "Survivors," Sorel replied. "Descendants of those who once believed the node could unify us, not just politically, but biologically. When the wars came, we hid here. Generations passed. We've waited for the resonance to return." Lyra looked around awed. "You've kept the knowledge alive?" "We've evolved it," Sorel said. "But something we could never replicate was true harmonic synthesis. Until now." They led them into a central chamber, a dome where the stars outside were projected across the ceiling like a living sky. Sorel turned to them. "The node is not a weapon. It is a seed, but a seed needs guardians." Lyra touched the shard at her chest. "You're saying we're not just bonded. We're connected to something bigger." "You are its next steward," Sorel confirmed, "and the child you carry," her gaze moved gently to Lyra's abdomen, "is the first of a new line, not just genetically unique, but symbolically vital. Every power in the galaxy will seek to control it, not out of malice, but fear." Cade folded his arms. "Then we need to disappear." "No," Sorel said. "You need to lead." Cade let out a laugh. "We're fugitives, not prophets." Sorel stepped closer, her expression kind but firm. "Do you think the first Tyrannus scientists weren't fugitives? That change ever begins in palaces? You have been chosen, not by prophecy, but by possibility." Lyra looked to Cade. "If we stay here, we can protect the child." "We can learn," he said, "understand what's happening to us, and prepare." Sorel gave a small nod. "The cradle will shield you and train you, but this protection is temporary. The storm will come." Later that evening, Cade stood on a floating balcony, staring at the stars. Lyra joined him in silence. The node shards pulsed softly on their chests, synced perfectly. "You scared?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "but not of the future." "What then?" She turned to him. of how much I need you." He didn't respond at first, just looked at her, at the flickering light in her eyes and the warmth that had begun to replace the cold distance she'd once worn like armor. "I used to be afraid of letting anyone in," he said, "thought it made me weak. And now, I think letting you in might be the strongest thing I've ever done." She stepped closer, resting her hand against his chest. "You're not just the strongest thing," she whispered. "You're the best thing." And when they kissed, it was no longer desperate or uncertain. It was grounded, steady, real. A bond not forced by resonance, but grown from it. As they embraced, above them the stars shimmered, and somewhere deep in the heart of the cradle, the original node pulsed once. The next chapter had begun. The days that followed inside the cradle passed like a slow unfolding. Time lost its usual rhythm. Cade and Lyra trained with Surreal and the other caretakers, learning to control the resonance, to understand its signals, its power, and its limits. The node shards they carried became more than just symbols. They were tools, mirrors, and keys. Sometimes during meditation exercises, they felt each other's thoughts so vividly it became difficult to tell where one ended and the other began. Other times, in silence, they would simply lie beneath the cradle's star-mapped dome, hands intertwined, the gentle pulse of the unborn child grounding them in something more tangible than destiny. But peace, as always, was temporary. The warning came not from sensors or scans, but from the node itself. One morning, Lyra woke with a jolt, heart pounding, her hand pressed instinctively to her abdomen. "They found us," she whispered. Cade was already on his feet. "Who?" She looked at him, eyes distant. "All of them." Within the hour, Sorel confirmed what they already knew. The resonance signature of the node had flared again, briefly, but enough to be triangulated by advanced subspace probes. And now every major power in the quadrant had converged on their coordinates. Orbiting ships arrived in waves. Vanguard warcruisers, hegemony dreadnoughts, Gen's stealth frigates, all posturing, all waiting, not one willing to risk open conflict yet. But it was only a matter of time before someone fired the first shot. Cade stood before the council chamber, flanked by Lyra and Sorel. The senior caretakers gathered around. "We have to leave," he said. "No," Sorel said calmly. "If you leave, they will chase you endlessly. They'll tear the galaxy apart looking for what you carry." "They already are," Cade shot back. "Then we must show them what they fear is not a weapon," Lyra said. "We show them us, the bond, the future." Cade looked at her, confused. "You're suggesting surrender?" "No," she said. "I'm suggesting a demonstration." It was dangerous, reckless, but they had no better option. And so, under the cradle's ancient guidance, they did what no Tyrannus had done since the old days. They broadcast, not words, not demands, but resonance. From the heart of the station, the node shards pulsed in unison, projecting an emotional signal, a harmonic frequency that carried across all comms, all sensors. It wasn't a threat, it was a feeling, a memory, a dream. In the minds of every commander aboard every orbiting ship, images bloomed. Cade holding the hand of a child with starlit skin. Lyra teaching others to blend old and new DNA sequences. A world where difference wasn't feared but understood. And behind it all, the steady pulse of unity. Some ships powered down weapons. Others hesitated. Some captains wept openly, overcome by the vision. But not all. One hegemony cruiser opened fire. The first plasma burst struck the cradle's shielding, and alarms flared. Cade was already sprinting through the station toward the hangar. "We can't let them dictate the narrative," he shouted. "We need to meet them." "You're not going alone," Lyra said, catching up to him. "We end this together." They boarded the Drift Seraph and launched into the chaos. Outside, ships danced on the edge of full-scale war. But when the Seraph emerged between them, broadcasting a powerful resonance signal that disabled weapons guidance systems, everything changed. Cade opened a wide-channel transmission. "This is Cade Riven," he said, "and this is Lyra Talon. We are not your enemies. We are not anomalies. We are proof." Lyra stepped beside him. "The node is not a weapon. It is a bridge. We are its consequence and its hope." They transmitted the full resonance wave. A flood of sensation swept through the network. Compassion, clarity, longing, healing. Not orders, not control, just understanding. The moment held. Then slowly, ships began retreating. Not all, but enough. The message was received. Cade slumped back in his seat, exhaling. Did we just win? Lyra smiled faintly. We just began. Back in the cradle, the aftermath was quiet. The outer galaxy had been touched, not conquered, but changed. Word spread. Rumors of a bonded pair who walked between species, of a child born of resonance, of a new path, one not carved by power, but by connection. Months passed, and when the time came, Cade sat beside Lyra beneath the cradle's canopy as their child came into the world. Radiant, starlit, pulsing faintly with the light of the node. A perfect fusion. Part him, part her, part something entirely new. They named her Raya, Tyrannus for harmony after storm. And as Cade held her, his scarred hand trembling with awe, he realized he was no longer running, no longer hiding. He had found what he never knew he needed: a family, a future, and a universe that, at last, was listening.